stuff. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to what is day 5 of our PowHERcircle challenge, and I'm going to try to do this by memory. Day 1, we talked a lot about articulating possibility. So what the possibility was that we see in front of us. We had a good conversation about clarity with Catherine. And then on day 2, we talked about connection and really deepening connection with ourselves, with what it is we believe and why we're here and how that plays out in the world. The following day, we chatted with Kelly, and we threw Kelly the topic about personal responsibility. Crush it, personal responsibility, and what our role is in all of this, like that dance between having trust, watching opportunities show up, but then actually taking the action that we need to take, and what our responsibility is in all of this. Yesterday en route, I chatted with Sharon Marshall. We had a good conversation about interconnectedness. And I'm still super curious about how interconnectedness shows up for people and what they think about that in life. I think we still all very much live these individual lives, individual businesses, individual, families, but yet we talk a lot about building community. And I think there's a lot more that could be done and said there. So we're going to move on today, and I'm pleased to welcome my co-host today, Angelique Meyer, my co-facilitator. And just before I introduce Angelique, I'll just and let you know our theme, and you should have the email already, but you might not have had a chance to open it up. We're talking about activating strength and how resistance and resilience plays into that. When I think about Angelique and the leader that she is, I'll give you her formal title first. Angelique is the Vice President of Assessment and Leadership Development at a company called Optimum Talent. When I think about Angelique, she has quite a story. Actually a phenomenal story that is definitely Netflix worthy. And when I want to talk about building strength as a powerful woman and being able to flip the hardships that we face in life to learning experiences, I honestly can't think of a better woman to sit down and have this conversation with. We don't need to open all of that up, but I just wanted to give you that context. Angelique helps leaders to navigate through conflict and chaos, optimizing the human side of change. Angelique, I wondered if there was anything you wanted to add to that short bio, just as a way of introduction, because most of the women on this call have not met you yet.
Yes. Well, hello. Good morning. What else to add to the bio? Well, I've been doing coaching and development training for leaders in business for over a decade now. And what I like most about doing that is to influence the leaders, especially the younger leaders, because my kids are getting to that age where they're entering the workforce. And if I can make leaders better leaders, my kids will have a better experience in the workplace. So that's my overarching why I do what I do, is if I can help make a few of these young leaders and even some older leaders be more accountable and be more intentional about their leadership, it'll make a better workplace for so many. What else about me? I'm a mom of 3, and I've got my pilot's license. So years ago, we used to do a lot of flying, and it gave me an interesting perspective of seeing the landscape and just being able to think and reflect about going places and people. Anything else?
I just lost you there for just a minute. Your connection faded out just slightly. Can you just repeat just that little bit about after you do have your pilot's license, which I think is super cool, and how that's given you a little bit of a different perspective on how you move in the world, landscape, navigation, that kind of thing. But I missed what you said right after that.
It was just about, yeah, giving perspective and being able to see the bigger landscape and realizing how we all fit together, even though we're in different places doing different things. We all connected, and we're not really that far apart.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. I'm going to just set the tone for today a little bit, and then Angelique and I have a few questions that we're going to talk about. The question in your journal, like what we're digging into today, is if we rethink our relationship with chaos, with struggle, with what is hard or what is defined as. So somehow in life we've given language to something that challenges us, that it's bad, that it's hard. Mm-hmm. But so somehow we've done that. But in fact, it's those very things that once we learn how to master them, take us to the next level. And I think about a little baby sitting on the floor, you know, and struggling to get up and struggling to get up and struggling to get up. And it's so hard. It's so challenging for them until the day they finally start to get up. And then look out, like you're baby proof in your house, because they're running everywhere. And it doesn't change from there. We struggle and we work to get up, and we struggle and we work to get up. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but once we learn to get up, well, the world better freaking, you know, powerhouse proof, the rest of the world, because we're off and running, you know. So the first question that I have for Angelique is, it's about helping us to maybe reframe that and stretch our definition around our relationship with chaos. How could we actually make better friends with fear and flip what feels hard into an exciting challenge? So to give it some context, I'm just wondering what you think about when you hear the phrase finding calm in chaos. What does that make you think about?
Well, in life and in leadership, there's always going to be chaos. That's partly why I have a job, is because there is chaos. And in that chaos is where the learning and the growth happens. You know, they talk about resistance creates struggle, and in that struggle is where we are able to find our wings. We've all heard that butterfly story. When the butterfly is trying to emerge from the chrysalis, it really needs the struggle to push the fluid down into the wings to help the wings expand. Well, I think that's true for us too. Without struggle, right, we don't ever challenge and push ourselves. Just like you were talking about with the baby story earlier, if the baby doesn't actually struggle and have resistance, it doesn't know where to push and where to focus and set some intention to grow. And just like we were talking about earlier about setting some goals and challenges for us, if we don't have struggle and we don't have challenge and resistance, we're never going to know how strong we are. Which makes me think of some struggles. And in the moment when I was going through some of those crazy times, I was wondering why does my life have to be so complicated and filled with all of these things that are, not normal or outside of what other people have to experience. At the end of it, and now as I look back, I think those struggles, I would never be the person that I am today. And especially with some of the bigger ones, it set my life in a completely new direction. And so I'm grateful for the struggles. Of course, now on the flip side of it, in the moment, I wasn't all that happy about it.
Right.
But now that I can talk about it in past tense, I'm really grateful for the struggles.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, and I just wanted to set some context for it. And that I think, again, just going back to how we've given language to, or we've given a certain perspective to something in life, where if something's a bit hard or a struggle, it's not good. But yet
Yeah.
you look at athletes, and the only way they improve their performance is to struggle.
Struggle.
But the funny thing, in athletes, you don't call it struggle.
You
You're
call,
bettering your performance,
well, you call it
right?
you call it practice, right?
Exactly, exactly. So how do we shift what we're perceiving as a struggle, or it's hard, or it's uncomfortable? And I love what you said. If you look for what's uncomfortable, that in fact is showing you where you need to put your focus in order to push and grow.
Hmm.
So yeah, great context.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, the analogy of the athletes. I use that in some of my workshop training. You know, if you were an athlete, you would put the extra effort in. You would practice, and you would be intentional about your behavior and your actions, and you wouldn't complain that you're having to put in all this extra effort. As an athlete, you just go ahead and put in that extra because you want to be the best, and you want to have those experiences. And so when we, as you know, as leaders, or as mothers, or as human beings, are going through these struggles, if we could shift it and think, well, for me, it was not poor me. Why do I have to go through all this? It was, I get to do this, and I get to have these experiences, and these new people get to come into my life because of these experiences. And I've met some incredible people because I've had to engage them, to help support me in some of these things that I was going through. And
Mhm.
learning, of course, all of the things that I've learned, I now use that when I do my storytelling in my leadership training. And I thought my stories would be pretty boring if I was facilitating these workshops without these struggles. My stories would be so boring. At least now I've got good stories.
Yeah, you're certainly the right person to be teaching this. Oh my gosh. Um, I wanted to ask you a bit of a big picture question for a second. And I
Okay.
think one of the reasons that I'm so fixated on this whole topic of struggle and resistance and building strength is because, um, in a bigger context, we talk about how do we move women up in leadership? How do we encourage more women to scale their business? And I'm wondering your thoughts around, to be honest, in my opinion, the reason that uh, if we're talking about the things that we have control over, I can't focus on the things I don't have control over right now. So I'm
Mhm.
just talking about the things I've got control over. If we're really honest about why more women aren't moving up in leadership, or more women aren't scaling their businesses, I tend to think this conversation is very, 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 very relevant. And I was just wondering if you think that that's like right out the window, or if there's some correlation, because that's just my opinion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Any
when,
thoughts?
yeah, so I was self-employed for many years, and my business a couple of times. And the thing that held me back the most was the fear, right? I was afraid. I was afraid to ask for help. I was afraid to ask for partnerships. And and then when I did get the courage and ask, and there was, a no, or I didn't get the deal, or I wasn't able to land the contract. And it was, I guess it was that resistance. It was the resistance. I wasn't able to land the deals, and I wasn't able to get the partnerships that I needed, or the funding that I needed. And I think, it was just, there's a lot to it, and doing it alone. And the thing that really resonated with me the most is I felt like I was doing it alone. And that's when I knew that I didn't want to keep doing this alone. That life is full of struggles, and there is going to be challenges. And it's so much better when you can do it in a group, in a team, in a partnership. So I love what you do, Charlene. I think it's really cool is that you're engaging other powerful women so that we can help each other and we can do it together. Because I'm able to do a lot alone. I know that. I know that I'm able to handle and do a lot alone. I just don't want to do it alone anymore. I want to
Mhm.
do it. I want to do it with a team. I want to do it with with some peers, and I want to be able to share the struggle, share the burden, and then share the successes too. Because
Yeah,
when the successes happen, it's much more fun when you can share it with the team.
totally. Yeah, like that. I've got that quote I like to say, like, leaders, not lone wolves. Like,
Yes.
we're all very strong, independent women that we know what we want and what we're after, but that doesn't mean we have to work, separately. That
Yeah.
doesn't, every time I get scared, I immediately flip it to all of the amazing women that I represent. And I do it to psych myself up. Like, there's like 10,000 of like these, it's like this army. And I just use that visual. And then I have no fear. Because if it's just, Charlene Sinjenko asking for something or whatnot, it's like, okay, I'm shriveling. Nope.
Yeah.
Get it. No, I flip that as quick as I can. So,
Exactly.
and it was funny. I took my husband out to Regina with us, and he just thought it was the best. He was like, "Oh my gosh, I just so want to be part of Powerhouse." Like, so I
Aw.
think, I think there is something there, but so I'm going to use the rest of our time to get into some tactical help. So we've kind of identified a few things here, but in your experience, in your life experience and your work experience with leaders, I'm curious how how we do this. Like, we're kind of seeing it maybe a little differently, but how on earth, when you're in the midst of a, a, a shitstorm, like, how on earth do you find chaos in that moment and pull yourself, I'm just curious on some of your tactical thoughts about what we can try to remember.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and some of the things that really helped me in some of those darkest times, or when it felt like it was a dark time, is to really keep an open mind. And luckily, I'm curious by nature, and I've got a strong sense of purpose. So I knew that I was going to get through this, or I needed to get through this. And it was just keeping an open mind, that I didn't need to know how I was going to make it through, because I honestly didn't know how I was going to make it through. I just needed to know the what. And for me, the what was, I wanted to get through this and be able to use these experiences in helping in whatever career I had or whatever was next for me. But I just knew that there was something next. So keep that open mindset. And then another thing that helped me get through some of this was being intentional in the decisions that I was making to accept the challenge. So I really wanted to, even though some of these well, actually all the challenges were thrust upon me, I didn't choose any of them, is I made the decision to accept that this is happening, even though I don't want these things to be happening. And I will accept the challenge, and I will find the resources. I will do the homework, do the practice, and I will somehow figure it out, right? I didn't need to know how. I just knew that I would somehow it would just come to me. One of the quotes, there was a quote, I'm trying to think exactly what it was, but it's, you don't need to know the whole pathway in front of you. You just need to know to take the next step. And so as things got really difficult, I reminded myself the best thing to do is just take the next step. And that fear was not going to get the best of me today. So today, fear was not going to win. I didn't worry about tomorrow or the next day. I just worried about what was happening today. And then when things were really getting stressful or getting overwhelming, I took one of my practices from one of the coaching retreats that I went on. It's about creating space. They took us out into the forest and they made us look at the spaces between the leaves, between the trees, and see how much space there was in a really crowded, dense forest. And so keeping that perspective is, no matter how dense or busy life gets, there's always going to be a space that we can create, time for ourselves, time to reflect, time to be intentional. And it really helped in those moments when the anxiety was getting to me or the overwhelm was getting to me, and I create space in the middle of chaos, and we can actually slow things down and feel that sense of calm when I needed it. And that has helped me so many times, even in the middle of a workshop when everything is going wrong and it's out of control, and I'm able to create that space and bring it back in and under control to and have the outcome that I want to have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's those types of things, is just really not fixating that you need to know all of the answers and how you're going to do it. You just need to know the end game. Where do I want to eventually get? And not be married to the timeline. Like it has to be done in the next 24 hours, or it has to be done this year. Sometimes things take longer than you.
One of the questions I'll ask here, and I hope the women will actually provide some answers in the Facebook group. I'm really curious how you build in, if you build in, and how you build in buffers in your schedule. Do you build in buffers? So I'm curious, Angelique, like how you and your, but I'm also curious to hear from the group in our Facebook group. What does that look like? What does creating space look? How does it show up in your schedule?
Yeah, buffers are very important. It was something that was taught to me a long time ago by one of my coaches, and it has to be built in your calendar. So either you block off your lunch hour, or you block off time at the end of the day or in the morning. And it'll have to change, and you'll have to be flexible on it, because you can't take lunch every single day at 12 o'clock. But there
Right.
are times you can build in the day, or even in the evening, just
Mm-hmm.
before you go to bed, just turn the TV off and turn the
Mm-hmm.
screens off, and just spend, that half an hour um, with your mindfulness practice. I find that my mindfulness practice has really helped me be more intentional and has helped me focus. That I can't say enough about the mindfulness. Even if you just do it for 5 or 10 minutes, it doesn't need to be a whole hour of it, but it has really reminded me that the breathing and being centered makes a big
Mm-hmm.
difference, especially when there's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I pre-build it into my calendar.
Yeah.
And if you have to write over top of it, that's okay.
Yeah.
Just build it in. It's that being flexible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being
Yeah.
able to adapt as your day starts to unfold.
Exactly. It's interesting. Dana reminded me of a really good visual that you had kind of spoken to, and it's in that place of overwhelm, just trying to have that visual. You had said, just take the next step. And there's a analogy out there, like it's like you're driving a car, and it's like we're all packing the car, and we're going to drive from Vancouver to Regina, or Regina to Vancouver, depending on where you might happen, and it's not like we freak out because we can't see our destination, right? And even if it gets like super windy and stormy and it's super dark, you focus on the 50 feet that you can see in front of you as far as your
Mhm.
headlights shine, and you just drive that distance, and then you drive that distance, and you drive that distance. but
Yes.
but somehow in leadership, like we don't pull some of those lessons across. And just because you can't see your final destination, you got to have that trust that you are driving in that right direction.
I say this in my coaching sessions a lot. Sometimes, well, a lot of times we think we're being paid to do a job, but that we're being paid because we have all the answers, and we're supposed to know what to do. There's many times in our jobs that we don't know what to do, and all we can do is that one next step. We
Mm-hmm.
don't have to have all the answers, but there's some notion out there that you're being paid to have all the answers. And there's very rarely any jobs that you actually have all the answers. So to give yourself a break and just give yourself the leeway that you'll figure it out in the moment.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes, I just love this quote, is when a bird lands on a branch in a tree, it's not trusting that the tree branch isn't going to break. It's trusting in its ability to fly.
Yeah.
And so I remind myself, it's not about the support system or the network or the job holding me up. It's about me trusting in myself that whatever the situation is, I will figure it out in the moment. I don't need to know ahead of time. I don't need to have it all planned out, even though I'll try to plan the whole thing out. I just need to know that in the moment, I will show up, I will be present, give my best, and I will figure it out. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because I always have. And we all have. If you're still here and you're still standing, you've figured it out. You
Yeah.
actually have a 100% track record of figuring it out.
Right.
Hence, you're still here.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
And I
that.
love that. That gives me comfort knowing that no matter what this new job or what this new client will throw at me, I'll figure it out because I
Yeah.
always figure it out.
Awesome.
It may not be pretty, it may be messy and bumpy, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, that was my power circle yesterday. That was good. Um, I've got a couple of closing thoughts, and then I'm going to flip it back to you. We're just about on time here. If I had two closing thoughts, one would be I when I'm faced with something and I feel like I'm going to fall into overwhelm or fall into something negative, I I flip it to a challenge. I definitely flip it. Like I almost look at it like I would, it's like, okay, bring it. Like I literally have to flip it into a big challenge, but like a game almost,
Yeah.
and I also remind people that some of the most amazing performers in music and in sport actually have ultra egos.
Yes.
And so if they need help flipping something, they literally go into Sasha Fierce
Mhm.
or, like into whatever your ultra ego is, where you're picturing yourself as this, amazing superhero or this, whatever it is for you.
Yeah.
It's all that mindset of how are you flipping on your ultra brilliance, so those, I just leave you with that, is like, find a tool to help you immediately flip it. And for me, it's kind of like, bring it, and I flip into an ultra, crazy version of myself, and then I go from there. But yeah, anyway, I'm curious on any final thoughts for today's topic, or just yeah.
Well, I remember Renee Zellweger was on the Tonight Show, and she was talking about her performance as Judy Garland in her new movie coming up. And she talks about Judy Garland was stage fright all the time, and she was terrified
Yeah.
that she was never good enough or she wasn't prepared. And her state in the early days, it was her mother, but in the later years, her stage manager would just push her out on stage, and she would be completely paralyzed with fear. But she did exactly what you were just talking about. She somehow switched into that alter ego and just sang from her heart and her passion. She just did the only thing that she knew what to do. And
Hmm.
it somehow was so authentic. And that's, I think, what the audience connects to, is when we're being authentic and just connect to that inner vulnerability of ourselves.
Hmm.
That's what I use when I have to give a big presentation or a big speech and I start getting very mechanical in my head. I have to remember that's not what they're there to hear. They can read that on a paper. What they're really here is to see your energy and your passion and see how, what it means to you, and to talk.
Hmm.
And then I channel my dad. My dad was a teacher, an amazing teacher, and he was so funny. He was way more funny than I am. And I keep wanting to channel his sense of humor,
Hmm.
because the audience and his students used to just love him, and he would make everybody feel special. And I want to channel that. So when I go out, I channel my dad and I say, okay, I want to be funny and engaging and make the audience feel special and
Hmm.
have a good time while we're spending our days together.
Neat.
And that really works for me.
Neat.
And it kind of gets me out of my own head and reminds me not to take myself quite so seriously.
I love it.
I have a tendency to take everything so seriously.
Well, I just wanted to wrap it up for today by thanking Angelique. She is one of the amazing leaders here on the West Coast that I have the pleasure of working with. You will be seeing some of Angelique's stories coming out very soon. We're starting to slowly work on them. And I encourage you to reach out to her. If you've not met her yet, I encourage you to reach out to Angelique.
Yes.
And it's all about building those cross connections and cross pollination, and practicing that interconnectedness. So thank you very much, Angelique, for being here today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlene, for having me. It was a real pleasure. And it was nice meeting everybody.
Awesome. Talk to you
Okay,
soon.
bye,
Thanks,
guys.
guys. Bye-bye.